You know, when you meet someone truly magical and then you just want everybody in the world to know about them? That is how I feel about Dr. Ava Roubin. She has opened me in ways that I could never have imagined. And seeing her every month is a non negotiable part of my care. I have sent many friends and colleagues to her, and everybody raves. Ava is a Chinese medicine practitioner who works with acupuncture, massage, herbs, and other therapeutic practices. And her intuition and listening is extraordinary. Being in a session with her is like nothing I have ever experienced in years of seeing gifted practitioners around the world. And I am so excited that you get to meet her today. Ava trained in Australia and China in gynecology, oncology, internal medicine, and acupuncture. And she is the co founder of Alchemy Therapies and Dispensary with her partner, Pete Coles, who is our guest on the podcast next week. Oh, grab a cup of tea and get cozy for this conversation because I think Ava is going to rock your world like she has mine. So let's dive in and get the skinny from Dr. Ava Roubin. Oh, Ava, I couldn't sleep last night because I was so excited about sharing this conversation with you, dear listener. You get to meet Ava and experience her zone of genius. So, Ava, tell me about the "it has to be me" moment that led, or series of moments that led you into the healing space and being a practitioner in many modalities.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying it was definitely a series. I think there was times where I ran completely from it. It's a long story, but I think that the biggest it had to be me moment was coming in. I had studied Chinese medicine for about 5 years at VUT, and I was coming up to the final exam, the exit exam, where you have a real life client and you're presented with a case and you've got people from the board of Chinese medicine sitting there. And I walked into this exam and somebody said to me, "Oh, you're here." And there was a moment there where I went, "No, no, I'm not." And I walked out and I left. And I had this sort of sense of, this can't be me. I'm too young. I went in to study Chinese medicine when I was 18. So I was in, 1998. And there'd been a lot of events in my life leading up to this beautiful moment of finding this thread of information and healing arts that resonated so well with me. And then standing at that final exam, I thought, I'm too young. I haven't had enough life experience. Who am I to be holding space for people, to be taking them through these big healing journeys? And I bought a troopy with my then partner and we travelled around Australia and found ourselves in Mullumbimby, as quite a lot of us do. And and started practicing. So I had had my own massage business for a while leading up to this point whilst I was studying to get me through uni. A lot of people work in bars and pubs and restaurants, and I'd been doing meditation and massaging and I thought it's time for me to be a rat bag. It's time for me to get some life experience. So in that time up in, Byron and that area, I came across a beautiful mentor, Jo Judge, and she really helped me tap deeper into that intuitive medicine, and the courage into speaking about what else is in the room, what's really going on inside somebody's body whilst we're treating and outside of their body. And eventually, I left Byron area, continued around Australia. It'd been about a year and a bit, and I thought, I have to face this. I have to go back. I have to step up into this. So I came back to Melbourne and the course had changed. So 5-6 years of doing Chinese medicine acupuncture, I was then confronted with, you've got to study herbs now in order to be completely qualified. So in I went, another 5 years. And I think that was my first big, this is me. It doesn't matter how long this takes. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm here to be doing. Um, And it was great because I got to learn a whole other craft that I wouldn't have usually have picked up, and so now we're working with plants as well as needles, as well as moxa and cupping and massage. So that was a really big turning point of dedication into it. But look, to be honest, there was so much throughout the career of doing this where I'm confronted with going, am I like, how am I qualified? I'm a white woman walking on Wurundjeri land, practicing an indigenous medicine that comes from China.
Mm.
What am I doing? Who am I to be doing this? So, I still grapple with this, but at the end of the day, this is what I do. This is who I am.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by this journey that we're all on between running away and stepping into things. So when you say you were running away from it and then you decided to step into it and then you ran away and then you decided to step in, this kind of ebb and flow of grappling with identity and what we should or should not be doing, or what we want to be doing or not want to be doing. When you talked earlier about running away from it, you're too young, you're too this, you're too that. Was it the conversation with Joe Judge that kind of, come on, are you going to do this or not do this, that helped you step into it? A mentor kind of helping you see that you really should be doing this or could be doing this? Or was it going and studying more? Or was it a confluence of all of those things?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think it's all those things coming in together. I believe what's meant for you won't pass you by. So if it's not a mentor giving you a good
Mm.
kick or push forward into it, then it's going to be the universe. It's going to be something else. I think back to, some of the beginnings of these roots, and I get the imagery of my father's bookshelf. There were books
Mm.
there about the Kabbalah. There was books there about mysticism, archetypes, Jung, symbology. There's sort of this sense of I may not have been born into the traditional Chinese medicine lineage, but there is magic around me a lot, and I grew up in a quite a liberal, loose Jewish family, and
Mm.
um, we did my bar mitzvah when I was younger, and the rabbi just looked at me, and we had to keep postponing it, which you're not really meant to do, but because for me, some of it was just not clicking, and in the end, he handed me what was it called, Buddhism for Dummies, right? And he said, I think this path is more you. So there's been these little nudges throughout
Wow.
my life, just steering me into this of beautiful, wise mentors. Guy Bennett's with 5 element acupuncture and Miki Osenki with the esoteric acupuncture. All these people really did shape and change the way I treated and the way I saw the world.
Yeah. Talk, talk me through what it was like when you took up the invitation to go to China. You spoke before about being a white woman practicing these indigenous ancient modalities and not feeling like you could claim that within yourself. What shifted for you when you were immersing yourself in practice and study in China and seeing how they were integrating, Eastern and Western
Mm.
modalities?
Look, China was a whirlwind. I'd been learning Mandarin for a couple of years. I thought that I would turn up, wipe my feet, wash my hands, bow my head at the doors of the temple. But instead, it was like walking into a Grey's Anatomy scene. It was wild and crazy and busy, and the hospitals are full, and the doctors over there, in order to practice Western, you have Eastern medicine. In order to practice Eastern medicine, you have to be trained in Western. So it was a really big push of going, oh, this has nothing to do with you. Get out of the way and practice your medicine. It was,
Mm.
um, I remember on the first day I'm sitting there and we're given our white coats and we're in the internal medicine department, and I'm sitting at the table and there is 5, 6 other people around me and everyone's talking, and I very quickly realized that my Mandarin was not going to cut it. And so did they too. It was a very rude awakening of, and anyway. So I've got these incredible professors, people that I've been studying their texts and trying to learn from, and they're standing next to me, and I'm wondering, who are the other six people sitting around this table? And he's like, well, they're your next clients. And everybody is having an opinion of what's happening with this one client in front of me. And the momentum was so fast. It was like you've got 6 minutes to go through, make up your herbal formula, check their medication, and move on. And so, I think my most fondest memory is having to feel hundreds of pulses every day in that clinic and learning this infinite wisdom in this wild hospital setting. It was not like I thought of going up the mountain and sitting in the temples and meditating for 3 days. It was all on, you're in, you're out, get out of the way if you're not keeping up. Um, and so it was inspiring for me. I was like, these two worlds can coexist beautifully, in fact. We've got like people in the cardiac ward, all of them were getting this 4 gates acupuncture just to lower the blood pressure before the doctor was coming in to give them their meds for the day. It was magic.
Oh God, I'm so fascinated by how they integrate, Western medicine and Chinese medicine, and it would be wonderful to see more of that, in Australia and America and in all these other countries. I love how you say that Chinese medicine holds that depth of wisdom, and that entering into healing through this modality is like opening up and seeing the world through nature's eyes. And you
Mm.
talked before about realizing that it wasn't about you, to just listen and let the medicine do its work. So, and before you talked about struggling between in taking up invitations and running away from them. So, and still struggling with that now. So, how do you consciously practice getting out of the way, reminding you that it's not about you, and to just listen and let the medicine do the work?
That's a good question. It's I think it's more of a feeling. It's not an I think. It's one of those ones.
Mm,
It's when you're sitting in a room with a client, with a person, with anyone. It's about finding that meeting point, that gate,
mm,
that invitation to be present with someone. When you attune yourself and when you're doing that each day, there is this sense of the ego just getting out of the way. You can't do that if you're in the room, right? It's very difficult to hold space if you're making it about you. Um, it is very difficult to do the kind of treatments that we do in the room if it's about me. I can't hear the what is occurring within the room and within a client's soul if I'm coming from it of, can I do this right? Is this the right way? So I'm trying to sort of come back into your question with that is, how do I keep turning up for the invitation? It's exactly that. It's a little bit like, I remember hearing an interview with Tom Waits, or maybe it was Leonard Cohen, and he was saying, I always, when I'm driving, I always have a pen and paper with me because I might be on the highway and the wind will deliver this song. And if I can't pull over and write it down, it's going to take that song to the next artist. And I think we've stopped seeing artists that way. I think we've stopped identifying that something can come through us and that can be the magic. And we just have to turn up in our rawest, barest moments and as our true sort of raw self in order to make room for it to come through. Um, so look, maybe feeling a little bit less equipped for this kind of life has made it easier for me to step out of the way and to let the work do its
oh,
purpose.
that's
Yeah.
so interesting what you're saying, because we typically hold feeling less equipped as a deficit or a failure, and
Mm.
you're holding it as a gift. Is that the right way to interpret what you just said?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, when I turn up to work, I know that I've done my meditation in the morning, I've wiped my feet, clean of as much of the gunk that I'm going to be bringing into that room. I do continuous study, because I never assume that I know enough.
Hmm.
Some of the, you want to be turning up to a practitioner that is completely intrigued by every little symptom that you're having and your history and who you are and how you're turning up in a room, not about them keeping on returning to what fascinates them in the medicine. So the less attached to my knowledge or my center, the more able I am to actually hear what's going on for you and what we need to work with you. Um, so yeah, my deficit, I do feel that, I mean, in Chinese medicine anyway, we have a constitutional type, and the constitutional type is one of the five elements. Within each element, you have this organ, dual organ system that's working for that. And that sort of denotes a little bit of your perception on life, a little bit of the personality, a little bit of the more likelihood to react in certain ways. Um, and mine is water element. So when you think about water element, we tend to just keep moving, keep going with the flow. If there's something in our way, we'll move around it. There's not as much time for water elements to sit and ponder and ruminate over ourselves, as there is maybe for certain other element types.
Let's go through the other four elements, because I'd love to back into the way that you work with people, which, my personal experience, which I've had many sessions and will continue to have many sessions. The session is different every time, depending on what my body and energy is communicating to you and so forth. So you talked about the water element. Can we go through some of the others so that we can just get a sense, so we're all listener working from the same lexicon
we get a
as
bit,
we
we get
continue
a
this
bit nerdy with
conversation?
you.
Let's get nerdy. Oh,
Let's
I
get
love it.
nerdy. Yeah. So there's water, wood, fire, earth, metal, right? And I mean, look, most people know a little bit about the elements. So, I kind of cut more down to a lot of the way I work with the elements is through psycho-emotional presentations. And um, the idea here is that we're all born with quite an equal distribution of chi through all the elements, a really sort of uncarved stone, so to speak. And part of being in this world is about losing that connection to your natural self or your true self and learning how to move back onto the path to be in harmony again. And it's not to have this perfect balance between the five all the time, but at that first point of shock, that first point of disconnection from that original nature, we have one element that tends to step forward. Okay. And they call that, that's more denoted around what your sort of life purpose is, what you're here to experience, what your sort of mental, emotional, psychological development will be as well as physical. So when we're looking at, say, earth element, right, you'll notice with earth element people, we can identify them because they'll have a sing-song tone when they're talking.
Hmm.
The room might smell quite sweet. There's this sense sometimes, when an earth element person is in balance, they're really nurturing. It's like nature, mama earth, come in, let me feed you, let me teach you, let me wrap myself around you, but out of balance, when earth elements give too much, they can get a little bit brittle, they can get dried out from it. The earth element people are very creative. So often, if there's an imbalance with an earth element person, we'll see the core and the root disharmony might come through the digestive system. They might be coming in with headaches or endo or MS or something completely different, but the journey is to work back to this core aspect of self and to balance that up. And so different elements have, really different presentations in a room. Fire element, you can't help but notice a fire element, Tess. You're a bit, we're still working through which ones here, but they light up a room, they ignite people, they start conversation, they require this depth of intimacy when you're talking to them. Let's share what is of the core value of you. Let's get to the heart of the situation here. And they're a lot of fun, but they can be talking about something absolutely heartbreakingly serious, but there'll be this kind of tone of like, but everything's okay, you know, this is life, this is how it goes, you know. But again, you know, fire elements can feel sadness, and they can burn out in a way that they'll hit a depth of sadness that's quite different from other elements. So, you know, when we're looking at all the elements, we're looking at, you know, the leaders around the world, sort of looking at what's going on there. Like, you know, when you've got a wood element leader, they can be really precise and forward thinking and quite future planning, but they can also be quite tyrannical and angry and very um, sort of like the general of an army, you know. Like there can either
Hmm.
be great growth or there can be huge stagnation, you know, and huge damage done. And so, you know, when I'm working with clients, and especially in, you know, really troubled times like we're having at the moment, it's really quite important to know what's at the core of somebody, so that when someone goes through shock, trauma, despair, you know, loss of hope, we can come in and nourish it at the core of that person's being and really actually assist of what's going on here, you know. Are you gnawing and ruminating and really stuck through that stomach spleen area and not able to clear your thoughts to know what point of action needs to be taken? You know, are you doing too much action and actually burning yourself out, you know, at the heart of things, and losing compassion and understanding, you know? So, you know, there's a lot there in the elements besides the physicality of the seasons and the smells and the tastes, and you know, it's really how someone presents himself in the world and how they receive the world can be seen through the eyes of their element.
Yeah. Tell me about metal.
Mm. Love metal, right? Metal are it's the lung and the large intestine is the organ system that goes with metal. We're in metal at the moment in Melbourne, being in autumn. Metal is when we can see the furthest, like autumn is we're seeing the furthest along the horizon at the moment. We've got the curtains are pulled. We've got a clear view to the heavens. The lungs are the organs which are the closest to the heavens. So metal element people are often, um, you know, they need that beautiful connection to that which is of most pure, right? So you see a lot of architects and jewelers and yogis and you know, people who are into the finer things in life, who really value clear communications that are of value. So when I'm with a metal element, it's like, yeah, with the room, the candles are lit, the linen's crisp, everything is set so that we can sit, you know, to the essence of almost like a godly conversation, right? And metal element people have a lot of insight to share, like the perception on life just cuts through the rubbish. Um, and unless, you know, a metal element person in balance, you'll walk into a space and it feels like clarity. You know, it
Mm.
lifts you, it lifts your mind, it lifts your soul, it lifts your spirit up. Out of balance, you know, there can be a lot of clutter and things that aren't being let go of in the metal element personality,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, Guy Bennett's my mentor with five elements. He would say, you know, you're with a metal person. You may not realize it at the time, but you might walk away and realize that a comment or a call of theirs has cut straight to the truth of you and you've been sliced open. Um, and I'm like, oh, yeah, you know. And he goes, the metal element clients you'll always prepare for. You'll make sure that you've drunk your water, you've eaten your wheat bix, you're in your center. You know, you wanna sit there and meet that beautiful righteousness and integrity of metal.
Yeah. Did we go through the five? We
No,
did water, we did
no, not quite.
fire, we did
So
metal.
water people love living on the edge. It's the kidney and the bladder system. They're very driven. You know, you want to annoy a water person, just walk slowly in front of them. Walk slowly, you know, slow them down, right? But in the same sense, you know, water is very clear. It takes on many forms. So we're great shapeshifters.
Yeah.
Um, they can be as still as a lake, you know, and you feel so calm around them and the depth of this ancestral wisdom, you know, that comes through the kidneys. Or you can feel a bit on edge, you know. So I used to do diving and platform diving and a bit of cliff diving. And it was normal for me to be in a constant state of needing to feel on the edge of life.
Mm.
Um, and that's the real water element aspect. So, yeah, the water elements need a lot of reassurance. Okay. Earth elements need to be understood. Metal elements need to be respected, valued. Fire elements need that sort of depth of intimacy met. Share something personal, like be warm, open your heart in the room to them. And wood elements, they need to know that you've got your shit together. Excuse my language, but they need to know what the plan is, what direction are we heading, what to expect from the treatments, and that you're going to be able to help them grow, right? So we can spend hours talking through every element and the aspects that are likely to show up in the personality traits, but it's not even so much about that. I think at the end of the day, it's learning how to meet each person completely in the room when you're with them as a practitioner. And if I'm going gung ho, moving ahead in my full water element, and I'm sitting with a metal element person, they're just going to find it so crude. Like,
Yeah.
slow down, be present, take a breath, So we have all of these elements in us, and it's learning how the room feels, smells, what your senses are to identify what's needed in the room when you're with someone.
Yeah. Talk to me about what you love about acupuncture and the power of that in terms of what's
Mm.
needed. Because when I'm in session with you, the acupuncture is different every single time,
Yeah.
obviously because what's needed is different. And it's so powerful. And so I just, for listener, if you have not experienced acupuncture, it'd be just great to just talk about why it is so powerful in your experience. I mean,
Yeah.
the holy needles is what I want to call them. In the hands of you, specifically, I should say.
um, Look, acupuncture is a bridge. It's a bridge between the different sensations within a person's system and outside of a person's system, right? So, this sense of wanting to feel in our body, embodied, connected, right? That too can exist in and amongst us feeling this sense of chi and vitality around us. So, for me, the magic of acupuncture is I'm only ever using points that are precisely for a person in that exact moment of what they are really requiring. And in order to do that, we have to hone in and listen to the pulses, feeling the pulses, listening to what's going on in the room. So I think the magic of acupuncture, it can be experienced in so many different ways depending on the style of acupuncture that you're choosing. But essentially, what I've learned is it brings somebody home. It brings somebody home to their heart, to their body, to an embodiment, to a sense of what's going on around them. And it's a realignment, of everything. And that's an oversimplification of it. But to be able to um, move chi, to be able to reassign, where there has been a malalignment, where there's been shock, where there's been trauma, to sort of, pull down the bricks of a dam and to finally let that nourishment come through a whole system. It's magic to watch, you know. And
It's
I have
magic
so
to feel.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
magic to feel it. I mean, I
yeah,
always go away from our sessions feeling like I'm put back together. That's not very eloquent, but
yeah,
feeling like I'm completely in my body and I feel really solid in that. Even,
mm,
and at the same time open. But
yeah,
it's not a very good way of
yeah.
describing it,
No, well, it's like that, isn't
but
it? You
that's how
kind
I
of you
feel. Yeah.
float out of there in the most embodied state. And
Yeah.
it's taken me years. Like, I mean, I've been practicing for what, nearly 20 years. And it's taken me a long time to sort of move between that initial sort of immaturity of my lust, to with some of the esoteric acupuncture to kind of want to blow myself out into the ether, to traverse the realms and to enhance my vibration and psychic ability. And then, actually sort of learning that one of the most important and most valuable things is actually just grounding, just to be in your body, to know what food to eat, to know your rhythms and your patterns and the cycles that are going on within you and outside of you, and to kind of come into that. So I think obviously, the treatments reflect a little bit of that. Yeah, we can have a little bit of fun with moving into these sort of larger realms that are bigger than us. But then at the end, you are reset, you're in harmony with yourself. And I mean, look, there is that sort of quote, which is to be well and healthy in and amongst a sick society is not a sign of health, right?
Hmm.
So currently, acknowledging everything that's going on, none of us are really quite fully embodied and completely well. How can we be? When you have a treatment of acupuncture, you come into mending and healing the bits that have been, rubbed a bit raw from what's going on in the world around us. You get soothed, you get put back together so that then you can come through and influence your communities and your life in the most positive and centered and heartfelt way. When we keep pushing on and we're out of alignment, and, it might just be that our liver chi is stagnant, so we're finding that we're pushing up and we're fighting up against things and we're getting nowhere, and it just takes a few points to release that liver meridian. And then all of a sudden we can kind of see through the wisdom of that meridian, which is not just the friction that's required for growth, but how to harmonize that, through your system, and how to harmonize that so that you've got the most beautiful growth and progression of your ideas and your vision in this world. And that can come forward and be planned out properly, and you can live it properly, as opposed to being held up, pushing through it, busting through, coming back to the same cycles of stagnation or incompletion of your tasks and your goals and your dreams. These things, these habitual patterns that we are constantly stuck in as people, can actually be a sign of our disharmonies within our bodies that just need a few little release points. The liver might need a little bit of tonifying so we can better execute what it is that we're here to walk through in our life, right? So that's why I think when you hop off the table, you feel so good, regardless of whether we've worked on the liver to action your dreams or to action your destiny into purpose, or whether we're working on your, stomach and spleen in order to properly absorb the joy and the nourishment from all of your hard labor that you're putting out in the world. You're getting balanced so that you can actually return to this sort of true path, right? To live through what it is you've signed up to do in this world, and to be able to share that with joy, with laughter, with this abundance, so that you can walk through as a happy person, or at least a more balanced person.
Yeah, I want to ask you about cycles. And we've been talking about seasons too, when you talked about autumn. We hear this, live with the seasons and all these terms being bantied about, but to actually feel that and welcome it in and take up the invitation and feel that in an embodied sense is a very different thing than claiming it intellectually. So when you're helping people to feel that in an embodied way, I feel like breaking habits and cycles is something that we consciously do, and then we invite it in unconsciously. And then when we marry the two, we really claim it, or at least that's how I experience it with you, because it's a bit of talking when we're in session, sometimes not a lot of talking. It just depends on what's required. So how do you help people, or can you give us some wisdom around honoring the cycles of the external world whilst at the same time being in harmony with the cycle that is existing within you? I'm not even
Yeah.
sure if that's the right way to ask you that. Maybe you can help me with that.
No. Yeah, no, I know, I understand. I can hear what you're saying because when, I mean, I think especially with you and I, we've done work. So the depths some things are felt sensations, right? Other things can be intellectualized. But let's go with this, is see if we can find our way with this. Um, let's start with right now, right? We're in autumn. This is a cycle. It is really natural in autumn to be feeling a slight sense of grief, longing, sadness, letting go. A sense that something is missing in your world, like you've lost a twin, or something is not right. Like, this is a normal state to be. The leaves are no longer providing shade. They're drying up.
Mm.
They're falling off the tree. The trees are letting them go. They're standing in their bareness, right? So what it is first acknowledging that not only externally are these cycles going on, but same too internally, right? We've got to embrace with the autumn too the taking in the new, taking in breath. So we move our exercise maybe from being quite active in summer into this more contemplative, meditative breath work, gentler sense of exercise. So this is how we're merging the external and the internal. Chinese dietetics, using pears, bit of cinnamon, white-based vegetables, cauliflowers, nourishing the lungs. Like, there is so much we can do in that cycle that is not just about, okay, we're going more inward, we're getting ready for winter. Now, I want to sort of marry this and not lose you too deep, or not get too heady with this. But um, cycles are like archetypes as well. Jung in psychology has
Mm.
spoken lots and lots and lots about archetypes. And, even in, you were interviewing, oh, forgive me, I've forgotten her name, beautiful woman who was talking about menopause. And, she touched on cycles. It's like, yeah, look, we've got the archetypes of the maiden and the mother and the crone. And, there are cycles all around us. Then what I'm really fascinated about with Chinese medicine is some of what epigenetics and modern science is starting to catch on to. This inherited cycles, inherited trauma, the fact that we carry our mothers and our mothers' mothers with us, that we've been in the
Mm.
womb of, you can go on and on. Indigenous medicine have been working through the ancestors and within your system to clear ancestral trauma for a long, long, long time. So when I'm in the room with a client, when we've worked on the table, it's not just you on the table, you know,
Yeah.
there's quite a few different people, that we're working with, and that's showing up through you. So when we are talking about cycles, you've got to be able to, and it can kind of be a little bit nauseating sometimes, is move internally. There's a horary clock. There's cycles within the day. We're in, what are we? We're in midday. So we're in the fire element. We're with the heart right now. So it's no surprise, that this is the time where we're sitting and talking. A lot of European countries, they siesta, they're with the family, they're sharing joy, they're making love in the middle of the day. Like, people are living to daily cycles so well throughout the world. And with acupuncture, we do the same. We take note. Where are we today? Like, someone's turning up between, to say, I'm doing an 8 a.m. treatment. Okay, we're right at this pinnacle of the stomach, spleen, the kind of mind of the body, the intellect, the yi of the body. Let's move into that. This is the best time to digest. What are you struggling digesting in your life at the moment? Let's talk about that, right? No point trying to do intellectual work when it's between 5 and 7 at night, your kidney time. You're going to be running, if you're adrenally fatigued, it's going to be when rage comes up. You're rushing to pump out the last emails. It's no surprise road rage is occurring when we're on our way home. Or, you think about like the family life, and the wild time of the night is between 7 and 9, when everyone is wide off their head on adrenaline. So when we're choosing to be present in our life, when we're choosing how we live, we pay attention to cycles. I pop on my beautiful soft clinic music between 5 and 7 at night, so that my kids get this sense of this bell drawing their attention back down into their body, slowing it down. It's not the time I'm going to be like, quick, get your books out, let's get the homework done, have you cleaned your room, come on, it's time to eat. It's like, no, 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 just pause, just soften the kidneys for a moment. In a lot of business mentoring, they're like, get the hardest things done first in the morning. Well, that's because our system is most capable. Our brain is most alive. Our digestive system is functioning at its highest at that time. And we see that gut-brain connection. Chinese med has been talking about it for thousands of years. The brain is a curious organ for Chinese med. It's the
Hmm.
stomach and the spleen that does a lot of the thinking and the intellect work. And you'd know that. Like, I was looking at all of your dietary stuff. It's so based on that. It's so based on getting that bacteria right in the gut and the small intestine, working at that highest form of intelligence through your food, through nature, through seasons. So,
Yeah,
does that answer where we were going?
oh, yes, and then some. Yeah, I mean, I just find that the whole small intestine thing so fascinating. It comes up a lot in our sessions about it
Mm,
being, this really important place of discernment.
yeah.
And that keeps coming around for us in session. I want to ask you about the esoteric acupuncture, which
Mm,
feels like someone took my heart and showed me the universe, or it allowed me to reach into my own heart and see all of the possibilities and be curious and loving about them, was the way I would explain the first time I experienced it. There's so many different kinds of acupuncture, as you said, and I would love to speak to you for 27,000 hours about it. So, dear listener, you could hear all the wonderful things that Ava has to share about this. What opened up for you when you were introduced to esoteric acupuncture and started practicing with that?
yeah. Um, it was the mouth of the universe. Like it was,
Yeah,
it's like
it's just so
I'm a bit lost
powerful.
for
Yeah.
words. How do I put it? Um, I am, I am, I am quite discerning when and how we practice the acupuncture and on who
Yes.
with the esoteric acupuncture. Just first off, it is not something that you do on someone who is not experienced in meditation
Mm,
and embodiment and being able to come back, right? Because
mm,
it is a journey. There's a lot of use of plant medicine coming into the West at the moment. There's an understanding that there are bridges and other aspects of energy that are coexisting in this space with us. Now, esoteric acupuncture was sort of brought forward by Mikio Senki, this beautiful Japanese American man. And he has used this, I don't even know how it came to him other than through meditation, but it's a combination of Ayurvedic, Chinese medicine, and sacred geometry, like Kabbalah, And so when we're discerning what esoteric pattern to use on someone, again, we're having to quieten the room and use a lot of the pulse diagnosis and intuitive skills to understand at what vibratory level do we need to realign here. And so these gorgeous patterns, these sacred geometry patterns that are done throughout the body with the use of acupuncture needles, heighten um, the energy in somebody's body. Some of them are reconnecting the kidney heart axis. Other patterns are called soul's journey, crack the Buddha's egg. Um, it's not something that you can really put words to until you experience it. But the best way that I can describe how it's felt for me is I felt an instant realignment of every chakra in my body, kind of a clearing of this karmic heaviness or inherited ancestral trauma, um, and it does sort of wake your shin, your spirit up a little bit, right? But again, in saying that, um, there's a lot of acupuncturists who won't use these sort of techniques because they are very potent and they are very expanding. And unless you know really how to hold someone embodied in their body, it's not fun to be, blasted through the universe and then put my street Thornbury, But yeah, look, I mean, I've had phenomenal, unexplainable things occur in a room with esoteric acupuncture. I've had it many a times on me when I've just felt like something is hanging around me that probably shouldn't, and whether that's come from an old aspect of myself or my psyche or my personality, I'm not necessarily talking about entities, something that I've outgrown that I can't quite shake, I'll use the esoteric acupuncture.
Mm.
I'd done a lot of transcendental meditation from when I was young, and having that familiarity with what that deep meditation is sort of the closest way that I can explain to the esoteric acupuncture.
Yeah. It's incredibly powerful and magical, and certainly one of the most potent things I have ever experienced. So I'm incredibly grateful
No,
to
it's like,
be able to do that with you. You have such a beautiful blend of all of the different healing practices that you have studied and worked with, and you use some and not others in the room in a session depending on what is required, as we've been speaking about. I want to ask you about physical touch with your massage,
mm,
because it's certainly the most powerful massage that I've ever experienced. Again, there aren't really words to describe it, and it's different every session, but it feels like a soul meeting, a soul therapy, a soul massager, like a cellular experience, a spiritual experience. And it's different every time, and depending on when you put where you put the needles and all the things we've been talking about. Because it's flowing through you, the healing, and you're getting out of the way, but you're physically connecting with somebody. What is that experience like for you? Like, how are you using physical touch in that way to open and realign and help balance somebody whilst at the same time getting out of the way?
yeah. It's exactly that, Tess. Like when I'm doing, so with a session, we'll sit, we talk, we discuss a little bit about what's going on. I get you on the table, have another feel of the pulses, and then we go into the massage. Now, for me, that was my primary form of healing for many, many, many years. That's what I practiced. And when I put my hands on a body, it's like there is a quietening, in the room, and then there is a felt sense, you know.
Mm.
And from that, I'm doing qigong whilst I massage. So I'm sort of almost a conduit between heaven and earth, and that's then getting sort of directed as qigong and qi practices are through the palm of the hands into the body. So there's areas there where I know, okay, we really need to support and tonify these kidneys, and so there is a direction of intent coming through the body to actually do the healing work. But I also use that time and that space to cue into the intuition, to open up, the small intestine, the listening to the heart. And that's when I feel that there's that soul meeting with the client and myself.
Yeah, the downloads
One,
come thick and fast during that massage. And I mean, you and I are often communicating telepathically almost, like
yeah,
I'll be thinking something, then you'll finish the sentence in my head and vice versa. I mean, it's just quite extraordinary.
yeah. It's amazing. Nothing shuts us up better than touch, right?
Yeah.
Like, it is permission to enter the other realms of true communication. And that's what happens. And I think without that, for me, like I need the movement, and I need the movement of the massage in the room to really get in the right zone, to get the downloads, to tune into the right radio frequency. And for you, sometimes, you need the touch as well to know that it's safe to then open the heart, to then have your intuition pass on to me. Because, again, it's not about me in that room. I'm not anything greater than you are in my intuitive capacity. It's what we create together in a space, and also how open you are. So, some clients, it's like, no, it's like radio silence, and we're literally there to maybe do more of a treatment on, It might be anything from, rheumatoid arthritis to, some lingering pathogen, COVID, residue stuff. So it's not always, but it's mostly that if you quiet and hush the heart and the mind enough, or if you quiet the mind enough, the heart will speak. Um, and it's fun, like it's pretty wild. Like your guides were pretty direct with what needed to be done in the room on some days, and we'd have quite a busy party going on in there.
Yeah, and I remember one session where you just intuitively just said to me, we're not going to talk today. We're just going to communicate through touch and through being silent. And it was very, very powerful in a different way, So again, I so appreciate how you show up in the world. I want to ask you about this extraordinary partnership that you have with Pete and this beautiful clinic that you've created together and safe space of healing and listening and communion and love. What has that been like for you, opening yourself up to a union of this magnitude? Is that the right way to explain it? Power, love.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there are words, but it's
Yeah.
quite extraordinary. But again, you ran away from it and then decided you were going to meet it, just to come full circle with what we talked about at the beginning. That
That's
push-pull
very
of
gestalt of
that.
you. I like that. Yeah, Tess, look, I remember Miki Osanki, saying there are many soulmates in this world, right? There are many of them. And he did a graph and he actually, had, because he's just such a genius, a calculation of how many there are. And he said, and they're great lovers, right? They're great friends, they're great relationships, they'll teach you lots. But the twin flame is often someone who's going to come through your destined path, like what you're here to do. Like they will challenge that, they will help that. And sometimes they're not meant to be a partner, sometimes they're not meant to be a lover, they might be a colleague, they might be your hardest life lesson. And you know I remember meeting Pete. The moment that we met, I had sort of intuitively just left a festival. It was halfway through the night, just packed up my tent, went down to the ocean, swam in the ocean, and I could feel something pushing and moving at me. And I remembered that there was a small benefit gig in a friend's backyard. And I went, you know what, I'll just go to that. And so I rocked up a little bit late and I was walking down the driveway to get to this gig and I just stopped and I went, oh God, my big love is here. And as you said, I ran away. I turned back to the car and I hopped in the car. I was like, no, thank you. I'd been celibate for 9 months. I had been focusing on a lot of, healing sexual powers, like doing the Mantak Chia. And I was just like, I am channeling all of my energy towards, this business that I'm going to start and finishing this huge epic journey of study. And anyway, I pulled my socks up and I went back in and I could feel this presence and I didn't want to turn around. I was just like, I don't want to see them. I don't know who this is. Eventually I turned around and being as clumsy as I am, the only thing I said is, so are we going to do this or what? And this beautiful.
I don't know if that's clumsy or just magical and direct.
Oh, I think back now and I'm like, he should have known to run.
Oh, gosh, no. I bet he was like, yes, we are.
And, and that was the response I got, right? So we started talking and it was quite interesting because we didn't do any of the normal flirtations. We dove deep into, talking about community, what we're doing in the world, how we're turning up to serve community. And, anytime we would try and sort of connect in, we'd look around and we just kept laughing because there'd be a circle of people sitting around us. What is going on? Anyway, I took that as a time. I was like,
the witness of the two flames, the twin flames.
Yeah, it was bizarre. And a friend took a photo at that moment. And I got up and left. I was just like, you know what? I didn't even know his name. I went over to a friend's
Oh,
house and I said, I think I've just had love at first sight. And she was just like, no. And I got a text, a call from the person whose gig is it. And they were just like, hey, I think Pete Coles has just said he's just had love at first sight.
oh.
So I just, there's that, right? And then it still took us a very long time to meet and to get together because, as you know, like you can have all of that, but that does not mean that you are meant to actually be together, right? So, um, yeah, it took us a little while to get out of the way. And there was that sort of pathway of going, are we meant to just be co-creating, this incredible dream in this space together, or are we meant to be in partnership together, and doing the rest of life? And so I think we had a good cycle, like a nice 7 to 8 year cycle where we were together and we're co-creating a lot of things, but there was still that friction. You can't be with someone, like Pete and not be consistently growing and moving and
Mm,
changing. And inherently, he's quite a lot more of an earth element. He likes things to be harmony, to move a little bit slower. I'm erratic and I am wanting to go down that, crazy path at whatever speed I can tumble and turn in. And he'll be like, well, let's think about this.
yeah, you're
So
a whitewater rafter.
totally, totally. And I mean, he's been one of my greatest teachers. I can talk about mentors, and then there's Pete Coles, and his his wisdom and knowledge. Like there is never a moment where there's not a book in his hand, or he's exploring a concept, or all of a sudden, like, what are you doing? He's like, I've just written a novel, but I'm not ready to share it yet. I'm like, alrighty. And you treated how many clients today? He's like, oh, 10, So, I
Oh,
mean, he is a very grounded and he's so intelligent. This man has the emotional intelligence that way surpasses mine, well, in a different way. And I have full respect for him. And yeah, throw kids in, throw family, throw school communities, like it's hilarious, watching what goes on. But I'm telling, at the end of every night, we've usually either got the fire going or we're sitting outside under all the gum trees here, and the conversations still inspire and fascinate me.
oh.
So, no matter what we go through, I'm sure I drive him mad buzzing around the place with my frantic nature and just going.
I think he would use the word inspire. He described it as you help him see in a different way.
Mm,
Is that how is that how
mm.
you would describe it, or you're a different person,
Yeah, I do.
obviously, so
I
you're going to
think.
have your own words?
Look, I think in the dance of any partnership, you've kind of got to have that. If you're both seeing things in the same lens, then stagnation can happen, right?
Mm.
Or you can move each other into trickster energy of believing whatever it is that you're both agreeing to see. So it is my job to tap Pete when he's ruminating too deeply on certain topics. He's very conscious, socially consciously aware. We talk a lot about what's going on within our community, within the greater community, within our client community, what the clinic is drawing in. And yeah, like it is my job sometimes, if he gnaws too deeply on the bone, to kind of tap him and go, hey, let's get our head above the water here for a second. Look at that. Did you see that owl that just flew past? And, coming back into a different flow. But, I think people have those dynamics. If we're lucky enough, we'll always have someone to just tap and go,
Yeah,
come on, Tess,
yeah. You
try from this
talked
angle.
about running away, coming back,
Mm.
choosing to meet in certain places within yourself and with Pete and other people in your life. You talked before about the wrench of throwing kids into the mix. What has motherhood taught you about getting out of the way, meeting, practicing?
Uh, Motherhood's been the biggest lesson, Tess, you know. give me a client going through existential crises any day, over the embodied, felt experience of motherhood, right? So my first experience of motherhood was, birth in the clinic, you know, holding clients, choosing to turn up and hold people. As been mentioned, you don't have to have children to be mother energy.
Mm,
But for me, having to be so grounded and so embodied and witness to the ebbs and flows that a child goes through every day is one of the toughest things I've experienced. I just want to get in there and I want to harmonize everything for them. And you can't. Job as a mother is to sit back and let them scrape their knees and let them try and figure out friendship dynamics and be doing all of this on sleep deprivation and not having time to meditate and watching your practices get torn apart and not being in your center, and at the same time having to turn up moment after moment after moment, and then go to bed with the anguish and the ruminating guilt over places that you didn't turn up enough for, right? Like, I've never had that with my practice because the room was held and quiet and still, and the presence is there, and it's one-on-one uninterrupted heart space with the client. And as a mother, that was I really leaned into Pete's earthing grounding energy
yeah.
for parenting. I really do. And yeah, I could have done all of the esoteric acupuncture and all of the work on myself in the world, but nothing quite was like the work of continually turning up and coming through with what these beings are needing. And it's not always what I want to be giving them, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Oh, I
good.
could talk to you all day and all night and into other realms till till the day is long for sure. I always close every episode with the same question,
Mm.
which is when you have a dream in your heart and you feel like you don't have what it takes to make it happen, what do you say to yourself? Or what do you say to a client? And I know you're going to say you say something different to every client because the conversation is different with everybody, but in a general sense, what would you say about that? How do we find our way when we don't think we're enough?
Well, we're going back in full cycle. Let's get out of the way. Get your head out of the way and just move with it, right? When the heart is talking to you, just listen, you know, discern the right moment to. There is a season for everything. And when that little bit of wave of energy comes up, or that little wave of courage comes up, where the distance between you and what that heart desire is, then move with that wave. Sometimes knowing, what your heart's desire is also the wisdom in that knowing is waiting for the right time or the right season
Mm.
to move toward it so that you're not pushing, you're not struggling through it. Things can come with ease, so too can that exist, right? Trust in that process that yes, some things take work, but so too can it just exist as something full of ease and grace.
Ah, thank you for this beautiful conversation and thank you for how you show up in the world. What a gift.
Thank you, Tess, and thank you for having me, and thank you for igniting so many conversations. I've really been loving listening to all your podcasts, and I just find you bring out, like, speaking of the heart of it, you bring out just such beautiful core truths in every speaker. So thanks for sharing.
Oh, I take that into my heart. Oh, what a gift in the world she is. I am so grateful that you got to experience a little bit of her magic today. And if you live in Melbourne or you know you're going to be in town, do not miss the opportunity to book a session with her so you can experience in person how extraordinary she is. But regardless of where you live, we can use what she was saying as a guide to find quality practitioners. when she was talking about aiming to be the kind of practitioner that's genuinely intrigued by every symptom that you have in your history, who you are, and how you're turning up in the room today. And I'm just fascinated by the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, the value in understanding your constitutional type, whether you're water, wood, fire, earth, metal, and how you present and receive the world can be seen through the eyes of your leading element. And the importance of honoring your constitution, listening to what you need, and balancing your systems regularly. And the power of acupuncture to nourish your system, balance your chi, and restore vitality. And how it can help you be in an embodied state and place of connection with yourself. And esoteric acupuncture, that's on a whole other level. And it was interesting what she was saying about generational trauma, the role that inherited cycles and ancestral stories play in our healing, that it's not just you in the room, that there's other people that are showing up through you. And the value of working with the cycles and the seasons, that when we're choosing to be present, we pay attention to the cycles within the day, that it's in the morning that our brains are the most active. So that's the best time to be digesting things and working through things. And at night, we can welcome the slowing and the softening and preparing for rest and regeneration. And the importance of that gut-brain connection, it just keeps coming up, doesn't it? And how Chinese medicine has been acknowledging this for thousands of years, that we've just got to get those beneficial microbes into our gut so that we can be working at our highest vibration and healing energy. And the beauty of massage, that physical touch is permission to enter other realms of trust and communication and intuition. And I really appreciated what she was saying about meeting people, that it's about finding that gate and turning up for that invitation to be present with somebody. And she was speaking within the context of a practitioner being in session with a client, but I think that we can apply that principle when we meet anybody. And what she was saying about relationships resonated really deeply with me, the value of different perspectives in the dance of any partnership, that when you've got the same lens, that's when stagnation can happen. And that by listening and honoring the insights and offers of your partner, you can see things that you might otherwise not be able to see. And we will definitely hear from Pete next week about his perspective about their partnership. And I really loved what she was saying about listening to the waves of energy and courage from your heart, that what's meant to be won't pass you by. And that if it's not a mentor pushing you forward into it, it's going to be something else that carries you. So I am just so interested in hearing what resonated with you from this conversation. So leave a review and post in the Facebook group, and you can connect with Dr. Ava at elkenme.com.au.
I want to hear about your It Has to Be Me story. So head on over to ithastobeme.com/stories to share it in our free community. You can also join the conversations we're having about this episode and others. I'm Tess Masters. Join me next week and we'll dive inside another great story to help us go from dreaming to doing.